3 seconds. That was all it took for Arthur Sterling's empire to crumble. $100 million was evaporating on the screen, and the smartest engineers in New York City were frozen in terror. The merger was dead. The company was over. But then, a shadow moved in the corner. She wasn't a coder. She wasn't an executive. She was holding a tray of dirty champagne flutes. In 4 keystrokes, she didn't just save the company. She humiliated the CEO in front of the entire world. But when Arthur Sterling tried to find the woman who saved his life, he discovered a secret so dark it would make the corporate sabotage look like child's play. You think you know where this is going. You have no idea. The air inside the penthouse ballroom of the Sterling Tower tasted like expensive scotch and sheer, unadulterated panic. From the outside, the Sterling Dynamics merger gala was the event of the decade. The Manhattan skyline glittered through the 30-foot floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off the diamond necklaces of the social elite and the polished cufflinks of Wall Street's sharks. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved like ghosts through the crowd, offering crab cakes and silence. But inside the glass-walled command center, set up in the corner of the ballroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. Arthur Sterling, the 32-year-old CEO of Sterling Dynamics, stood with his hands braced against the mahogany table. His knuckles were white. Arthur was a man who had been sculpted by pressure. He had taken his father's failing hardware company and turned it into the world's leading artificial intelligence firm in 5 years. He was known as the Ice King of the tech world, unflappable, emotionless, and ruthlessly efficient. Right now, the Ice King was sweating. "Talk to me, Marcus," Arthur growled, his voice low enough that the investors drinking champagne 10 feet away couldn't hear, but lethal enough to make his chief technology officer flinch. Marcus Thorne, a man who usually wore arrogance like a second skin, was typing furiously on the main terminal. Sweat beaded on his receding hairline. I don't understand, Arthur. The compiler is rejecting the handshake protocol. The encryption key for the merger transfer isn't aligning with the bank's API. "In English, Marcus," Arthur hissed. "We have representatives from the Federal Reserve and the Japanese consortium waiting for me to press the execute button in exactly 4 minutes. If that transfer doesn't go through, the stock drops 40% by morning. We lose everything." "It's a syntax loop," Marcus snapped, his voice cracking. "The code is eating itself. It's the Omega update. Someone must have altered the source code in the last patch. I'm trying to bypass it, but every time I cut the line, it duplicates." On the gigantic, mesmerizing screen that dominated the room, meant to display the successful transfer of funds, a small, blinking red error bar was growing larger. "Critical failure. System lockdown in T-3. Arthur looked at the countdown. 3 minutes until public humiliation. 3 minutes until his life's work was sold for scrap parts. He looked out at the crowd. He saw his rivals smiling, holding their glasses up. They knew. Somehow they smelled blood in the water. "Fix it," Arthur commanded, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "Bypass the firewall if you have to." "I can't," Marcus yelled, abandoning his whisper. "If I bypass the firewall, we expose the user data. We'll be sued into oblivion. We need the root command to untangle the loop, but I can't see where the knot is." Standing 5 feet away, holding a silver tray piled high with empty crystal glasses, Sarah Jenkins tried to make herself invisible. She was 24, though the dark circles under her eyes made her look older. Her uniform was a size too big, the black vest hanging loosely over her frame, and her honey-blonde hair was pulled back into a severe, messy bun. She was supposed to be clearing the VIP table near the command center. She was supposed to be deaf and blind to the conversations of the rich, but she wasn't. Sarah's eyes were locked on the terminal screen over Marcus's shoulder. Her brain, a machine she had tried to turn off for 3 years, roared to life. She saw the code cascading down the secondary monitor. To anyone else, it was a waterfall of green and white gibberish. To Marcus, it was a nightmare. To Sarah, it was music, and someone was playing a wrong note. Line 4042, she thought, her fingers twitching against the silver tray. It's not a syntax error. It's a recursive dependency. He's trying to force a string into a float variable. She bit her lip, tasting the metallic tang of fear. Look away, Sarah. Just walk away. You're a waitress. You're Sarah Jenkins, nobody from nowhere. If you get involved, they'll look at you. If they look at you, they'll find out who you really are. 2 minutes, Marcus screamed. I'm going to reboot the server. No, Arthur grabbed Marcus's wrist. If you reboot now, the latency will kill the deal. We missed the window. Then we're dead anyway, Marcus shouted back. The tension was physically painful. Sarah took a step back, intending to flee to the kitchen. But then she looked at Arthur Sterling. She had seen him in magazines, the billionaire prodigy. Up close, he didn't look like a titan. He looked like a man watching his house burn down with his family inside. There was a desperation in his eyes that broke her heart. And more importantly, the code was offensive. It was such a stupid, elegant little trap. She couldn't let it win. It was an insult to the math. Sarah scanned the room. The security guards were distracted, looking at the arguing executives. Marcus had stepped away from the keyboard to wipe his face with a handkerchief, hyperventilating. Arthur was gripping his phone, barking orders to an off-site team. The terminal was unguarded. Sarah didn't decide to move. Her body just did it. She set the heavy tray down on a side table with a soft clink. She took 3 silent steps across the plush carpet. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked only at the blinking cursor. She reached the keyboard. "Hey!" a security guard shouted from the left. "You, get away from there!" Arthur spun around, his eyes widening as he saw the waitress standing at the multi-million-dollar console. "What the hell is she doing? Security!" Sarah didn't hear them. The world narrowed down to the QWERTY keyboard. Her fingers, rough from scrubbing dishes and carrying crates, flew across the keys. She didn't need to delete the loop. She needed to feed it. Define variable X as null. Close the loop. Redirect output to port 80. She typed 4 lines of code in 3 seconds. Sudo override, NAS limit. Def resolve, check conflict. Void, return true, execute. She slammed the enter key just as a rough hand grabbed her shoulder. "Get off the equipment!" The security guard yanked her back so hard she stumbled, nearly crashing into Arthur. "I'm sorry," Sarah gasped, shrinking into herself, reverting instantly to the terrified servant. I was cleaning. I slipped." "You slipped onto the keyboard?" Arthur roared, his face turning red. "Marcus, check the system. If this incompetent girl deleted the kernel, I will have her arrested right now." Marcus rushed back to the screen, his face pale. He looked ready to vomit. "Arthur, look!" The room went silent. On the massive screen, the blinking red bar froze. Then it turned a solid, brilliant green. System optimized. Merger protocol active. Transfer complete. $100,000. The room erupted, not in anger, but in confusion. The success chime rang out through the speakers, a cheerful sound that seemed totally out of place with the violence of the moment. Arthur stared at the screen. He blinked. He looked at the timestamp. The transfer had gone through 0.4 seconds before the deadline. "Marcus," Arthur said, his voice dangerously quiet. "What happened?" Marcus was staring at the command log. His mouth hung open. The loop is gone. The latency is 0. The code. It was fixed. Fixed? Arthur turned slowly to look at the waitress. Sarah was already backing away, clutching her apron. She looked terrified. I have to go. The head waiter needs me. Wait, Arthur said, stepping forward. You typed something. No, sir, I didn't. I just dusted the keys. Sarah lied, her voice trembling. I don't know anything about computers. Please, I need this job. She fixed it, Marcus whispered, staring at the lines of code on his screen as if they were written in alien hieroglyphs. Arthur, look at this syntax. It's archaic. Nobody codes like this anymore. It's beautiful. Arthur looked back at Sarah, his eyes narrowing. He analyzed her like she was a broken algorithm. The oversized uniform, the messy hair, the calloused hands, and eyes that held an intelligence that didn't match the tray she was holding. Who are you? Arthur asked, taking a step toward her. Nobody, Sarah whispered. She turned and ran. Stop her! Arthur shouted. But Sarah Jenkins was fast. She vanished into the sea of black tuxedos and evening gowns, ducking under the arm of a waiter, slipping through the service doors, and disappearing into the bowels of the Sterling Tower. Arthur Sterling stood alone in the center of his saved empire, ignoring the applause of the investors. He stared at the swinging kitchen doors. Lucas, Arthur said to his personal assistant, who had materialized at his elbow. Sir, get me the security footage, Arthur said, his voice cold and determined. And find me that waitress. I don't care if you have to tear this city apart, brick by brick. Find her. The kitchen of the Sterling Tower was a war zone of clattering pans, shouting chefs, and steam. Sarah sprinted through the chaos, ripping off her black vest as she moved. She tossed it into a laundry bin and grabbed her heavy coat from the lockers near the loading dock. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Stupid. Stupid, stupid Sarah. She had broken the one rule she had set for herself 3 years ago. Don't be smart. Smart got people killed. Smart was the reason her father, the great mathematician David Jenkins, was currently rotting in a federal prison, framed for a cyber attack he didn't commit. Smart was the reason Sarah had dropped out of MIT, changed her name, and scrubbed her digital footprint until she was a ghost. If Arthur Sterling looked into her, he wouldn't just find a waitress who knew C++. He would find the daughter of the Jenkins traitor. And then the FBI would come. Or worse, the people who actually framed her father would come. She burst out of the service exit, into the cool night air of the alleyway. The smell of garbage and rain was a relief after the sterile scent of the gala. She pulled her hood up and walked fast toward the subway, keeping her head down. Back in the penthouse, the party was winding down, but the work was just beginning. Arthur sat in the security control room, the glow of the monitors illuminating his sharp features. On the screen, paused in high definition, was the waitress. Zoom in, Arthur commanded. The technician tapped a key. The image blurred, then sharpened. The girl's face filled the screen. She was striking, in a way that wasn't immediately obvious. High cheekbones hidden by poor lighting, intense blue eyes that looked exhausted. Her name is Sarah Smith, Lucas said, reading from a tablet. According to the catering agency, she's been with them for 3 months. No prior employment record. Social security number checks out. But it's thin. No credit history, no social media, no lease. She lives in a boarding house in Queens and pays cash. Sarah Smith, Arthur scoffed. A fake name if I ever heard one. A waitress who lives off the grid but knows how to patch a recursive loop in a quantum-secure banking API? Marcus Thorne was pacing the room, nursing a glass of whiskey. He looked shaken. His ego had taken a beating tonight. Ideally, Arthur. She's a corporate spy. Who else would have that kind of skill? Omnicorp probably sent her to sabotage us, but she panicked and fixed it instead. Arthur spun his chair around to face Marcus. That makes 0 sense, Marcus. If she wanted to sabotage us, she would have let the clock run out. We were 3 minutes from death. She saved us. Why? Maybe she wants a reward? Lucas suggested. Then why run? Arthur stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. She's scared. I saw it in her eyes. She's terrified of being seen. Where are you going? Marcus asked. To Queens, Arthur said. Cancel my morning meetings. You're going to a boarding house in Queens, Marcus sneered. Arthur, you're the CEO of a billion-dollar company. Send security. No, Arthur said, staring at the frozen image of Sarah on the screen. This is personal. She touched my code. Nobody touches my code. 3 hours later, the rain was pouring down on a dilapidated row of brick houses in Astoria, Queens. A sleek black Maybach rolled silently down the street, looking like a spaceship that had landed in the wrong century. Arthur Sterling stepped out, an umbrella held over his head by Lucas. He looked at the peeling paint of the front door of number 42. This is it, Lucas said. Apartment 3B. Arthur didn't knock. He waited. He was a predator, and patience was part of the hunt. He knew she would be awake. Minds like hers, and his, didn't sleep easily. Inside the tiny drafty apartment, Sarah was packing a bag. She knew she had to leave New York. The catering agency would have her address. It was only a matter of time. She threw her few meager possessions, 2 shirts, a worn copy of Advanced Cryptography, and a framed photo of her dad, into a duffel bag. Knock, knock, knock. Sarah froze. The sound was polite, firm, and terrifying. Sarah, a landlady's voice called out. There's a gentleman here to see you. Sarah looked at the fire escape window. It was rusted shut. She was trapped. She took a deep breath, grabbed a small paring knife from the kitchenette counter, tucked it into her sleeve, and opened the door a crack. Arthur Sterling stood there. In the dim hallway light, he looked even taller than he had in the ballroom. He was wearing a trench coat over his tuxedo. He looked out of place, ridiculous, and incredibly dangerous. Sarah Smith, Arthur said smoothly, or whatever your real name is. You have the wrong apartment, Sarah said, trying to slam the door. Arthur put a polished leather shoe in the jamb. He didn't push, he just held it there. You left your paycheck at the gala, and you forgot to invoice me for the consulting fee. I don't know what you're talking about, Sarah hissed. Please leave me alone. You fixed a $10 million coding error in 4 seconds, using a syntax that hasn't been taught in universities since the early 2000s, Arthur said, his voice lowering. You didn't just fix it. You rewrote the variable logic. That wasn't a patch, Sarah. That was art. Who taught you that? Sarah's grip on the door tightened. Go away. I can't, Arthur said, because here is the problem. You fixed the immediate crash, yes. But when you redirected the output to port 80, you opened a back door. My system is currently stable, but in 24 hours the data will start to bleed out. Only the person who wrote the redirect key can seal it. Sarah's eyes went wide. She mentally replayed the code she had typed. Port 80, standard HTTP, unsecured. I didn't mean to, she stammered. I just needed a quick dump for the cache. I didn't think you'd leave it running. Ah, Arthur smiled, a shark-like grin. So you admit it. Sarah slumped. He had tricked her. He had baited her with a technicality, and her coder's ego had bitten. What do you want? She asked, defeating washing over her. Arthur pushed the door open gently. He stepped into the tiny, sad apartment. He looked at the peeling wallpaper, the single mattress on the floor, the duffel bag on the bed. He looked at her. "I have 100 engineers at Sterling Dynamics," Arthur said. "They are Ivy League graduates, PhDs, the best of the best. And tonight they all watched the screen and wet their pants. You didn't. You saw the pattern." "I'm not for hire," Sarah said, stepping back. "Everyone is for hire," Arthur countered. He reached into his coat pocket. Sarah flinched, her hand going to the knife in her sleeve. Arthur pulled out a checkbook. "I need you to come with me," Arthur said. "Right now. We go back to the tower. You seal the back door you created. You optimize the rest of the merger code." "And if I refuse?" "Then the company crashes tomorrow morning," Arthur shrugged. "Thousands of people lose their jobs. My legacy is destroyed. And," he paused, his eyes locking onto hers, "I will have my security team run your fingerprints. I have a feeling, Sarah, that you really don't want anyone running your fingerprints." The threat hung in the air. He knew she was hiding something. He was leveraging her fear against her talent. Sarah looked at the checkbook. Then she looked at his face. Beneath the arrogance, she saw it again. The exhaustion. He needed her. "One condition," Sarah said, her voice steadying. "Name it." "Cash," she said. "No contracts, no paperwork, no HR files. I work as an outside consultant. I fix your code, you pay me, and then I leave. You never look for me again. You delete the security footage of me from the gala." Arthur considered this. It was highly irregular. It was dangerous. "Done," Arthur said. "How much?" Sarah thought about the lawyer fees she needed to reopen her father's case. She thought about the cost of a fake passport if this went south. $50,000, she said. Arthur actually laughed. It was a dry, short sound. "For saving $100 million merger, you sell yourself short, Sarah." He scribbled on the check, ripped it out, and held it up. 100,000. Tonight, another 100,000 when the job is done. Sarah stared at the check. It was more money than she had seen in her entire life. "Pack your bag," Arthur said, turning toward the door. "But leave the waitress uniform. You won't be needing it." Sarah looked at the check, then at the man waiting in the rain. She had just sold her soul to the devil, she realized. But at least this devil appreciated good code. She grabbed her coat. "Let's go." The drive back to Manhattan was silent, but the air inside the Maybach was thick enough to choke on. Arthur tapped away on his tablet, the blue light illuminating his sharp jawline, while Sarah stared out the tinted window, watching the city blur by. She was gripping the leather armrest so hard her knuckles were white. She wasn't just walking back into a job, she was walking into a lion's den. When they arrived at Sterling Tower, the gala was long over. The cleanup crews were vacuuming the confetti from the ballroom, but Arthur didn't take her to the ballroom. He led her to the elevator and pressed his thumb against a biometric scanner. "Floor 40, the automated voice purred. "Restricted access." "We call this the tank," Arthur said, as the doors slid open. The 40th floor was a stark contrast to the opulence of the penthouse. It was a cavernous, hyper-modern space, filled with rows of curved monitors, server racks humming behind glass walls, and the smell of ozone and stale coffee. This was the brain of Sterling Dynamics. Despite it being 2:00 a.m., the room was full. 20 of the company's top engineers were huddled around a central conference table, arguing loudly. When Arthur walked in with the waitress trailing behind him, the room went dead silent. Marcus Thorne, the CTO, was standing at the head of the table. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 3 hours. "Arthur," Marcus said, straightening his tie. "We're running diagnostics. We don't need her." Arthur ignored him. He walked to the center of the room and pointed to the main terminal. The master seat. "Everyone listen up," Arthur announced, his voice projecting effortlessly across the floor. "This is Sarah. She is the acting lead consultant for the duration of the merger integration." A ripple of shock went through the room. A young engineer with glasses scoffed audibly. "The Waitress? Arthur, this is a joke, right? This is a security breach waiting to happen. Does she even have a clearance badge?" "She has my clearance," Arthur said coldly. "And considering she fixed in 3 seconds what this entire room failed to fix in 3 months, I'd suggest you show her some respect. Sarah, take the seat." Sarah felt 40 pairs of eyes boring into her. They were hateful, jealous eyes. These men had PhDs from Stanford and MIT. They drove Teslas and wore Rolexes, and she was wearing a thrift store coat and smelling like rain. She walked to the master seat. The chair was ergonomic mesh, worth more than her monthly rent. She sat down. "Marcus," Sarah said, her voice surprisingly steady, "bring up the kernel logs. I need to see the compile history from the last 48 hours. Marcus crossed his arms. "I don't take orders from catering staff." "Do it, Marcus," Arthur warned, leaning against a pillar, watching the scene with intense interest. Marcus gritted his teeth and typed a command on his tablet. The main screen wall populated with thousands of lines of code. "There," Marcus spat. "Good luck reading that. It's raw hex data." Sarah didn't flinch. She leaned forward, her fingers hovering over the mechanical keyboard. To her, hex wasn't just numbers, it was a map. She scanned the columns, her eyes darting back and forth. "Here," she pointed. "At 04 yesterday, someone injected a dormant script. It masqueraded as a memory update." "Impossible," the young engineer with glasses sneered. "The firewall would have caught it." "Not if it came from inside," Sarah said softly. The room went deadly quiet again. Sarah began to type. She didn't hunt and peck. She played the keyboard like a concert pianist. The clatter of the keys was a machine gun rhythm. She pulled up the script, isolated it, and dissected it on the screen for everyone to see. "It's a logic bomb," Sarah explained, her confidence growing as the math took over. "See this loop? It checks for the specific date of the merger. If the date matches, it triggers the recursive error. It was designed to look like a glitch, but it's sabotage." Arthur walked up behind her, looking over her shoulder. He smelled of expensive cologne and danger. "Can you trace the origin?" "I can try," Sarah said. "But whoever wrote this is good. They routed their IP through a dozen proxy servers in Russia and China." "Just fix the back door you opened," Marcus interrupted, trying to regain control. "We can worry about the hacker later." "If I close the back door now, the logic bomb will detonate again," Sarah countered without looking at him. "I have to defuse the bomb first, and to do that, I need to know the encryption key." She paused. The code on the screen. There was something familiar about the structure. The variables were named in a specific pattern: alpha, beta, gamma, followed by prime numbers. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She knew this style. It was the prime weave. It was a coding architecture invented by one man, David Jenkins, her father. A cold sweat broke out on the back of her neck. Her father was in a maximum security prison. He couldn't have written this. Someone was mimicking him, or someone had stolen his work. "What is it?" Arthur asked, noticing her hesitation. "Sarah." "It's complex," she lied, her voice shaking slightly. "I need quiet. Everyone needs to leave the immediate area." "You heard her," Arthur commanded. "Clear the floor. Everyone to the break room. Marcus, you too." "Arthur, you can't leave her alone with the source code," Marcus protested. "Out!" Arthur roared. Reluctantly, the engineers filed out, casting angry glares at Sarah. Marcus was the last to leave, his eyes burning with a mix of suspicion and hatred. When they were gone, the hum of the servers seemed louder. Sarah stared at the code that looked so much like her father's handwriting. If she fixed this, she proved she was a genius. If she investigated it too deeply, she might alert whoever framed her father that his daughter was alive and working. "You recognized something," Arthur said. He wasn't asking. Sarah spun the chair around. Arthur was sitting on the edge of the desk, too close. He was studying her face, looking for the lie. "It's an old encryption style," Sarah said carefully. "I saw it once in a textbook." "You lie terrible for a genius," Arthur murmured. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was electric, shocking Sarah into stillness. "But I don't care about your secrets tonight. I care about my company. Can you kill the virus?" "Yes," Sarah whispered. "Then do it. I'll get the coffee." As Arthur walked away towards the kitchenette, Sarah turned back to the screen. She felt a tear prick the corner of her eye. She angrily wiped it away. "Dad," she thought, "who is doing this to you?" She began to type, not just to save the company, but to hunt a ghost. The sun was beginning to rise over the East River, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. Inside the 40th floor of Sterling Tower, time had lost all meaning. Sarah had been coding for 5 straight hours. Her eyes burned, her back ached, and her fingers were cramping, but she was in the flow state. The architecture of Sterling Dynamics was a mess of patches and updates, but she was weaving it into something elegant, streamlined, and bulletproof. Arthur had not left. He had spent the night reviewing documents on the other side of the room, but every 20 minutes he would walk by her station. Sometimes he refilled her coffee cup. Sometimes he just watched. He was fascinated. He had hired the best coders in the world, but they coded like engineers, building bricks one by one. Sarah coded like a poet. She used shortcuts he had never seen, exploited gaps in the operating system that shouldn't exist. "You're almost done," Arthur said, breaking the silence. He was standing right behind her again. Sarah jumped slightly. "How can you tell?" "Your shoulders dropped," Arthur said. "You stopped fighting the machine and started guiding it." Sarah hit the final enter key. The screens flashed blue, then settled into a steady, calm rhythm. The diagnostic bars all turned green. The logic bomb was quarantined, wrapped in a digital cage where it couldn't hurt anything. "It's done," Sarah exhaled, slumping back in the mesh chair. "The system is clean. The merger data is encrypted with a chaotic key that changes every 10 seconds. Even quantum computers won't be able to crack it for 100 years. Arthur looked at the screen, then down at her. Incredible. He wasn't looking at the code. "I need the money, Arthur," Sarah said, standing up. She felt dizzy. "I did the job. I need to go." Arthur nodded slowly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Cash. As requested. 100,000, plus a bonus." Sarah took the envelope. It felt heavy. It felt like freedom. "Thank you." "Stay," Arthur said. The word hung in the air. "What?" "Stay," Arthur repeated. "Not as a waitress, not as a consultant. I want you to be my CTO. I'm firing Marcus." Sarah stared at him. It was the offer of a lifetime, $1 million salary, power, respect, everything she had lost when her father was arrested. "I can't," she said, clutching the envelope. "Why?" Arthur stepped closer, blocking her path to the elevator. "Don't tell me it's because you like serving shrimp toast to assholes. You belong here, Sarah. You belong with people who understand this." "You belong with me," his eyes said. "People like me don't get happy endings, Arthur," Sarah said sadly. We just get by." She tried to step around him, but he caught her arm. It wasn't aggressive. It was desperate. "Who are you running from?" Arthur asked, his voice low and intense. "Is it an ex-boyfriend, a debt collector? I can make them go away. I have more money than God, Sarah. I can fix anything." "You can't fix this," she whispered. For a moment, the distance between them vanished. Arthur looked at her lips. Sarah felt a magnetic pull, a desire to just drop the act and tell him everything, to let him protect her. Bzzzt. Arthur's phone vibrated violently on the desk, breaking the spell. He frowned and picked it up. Sterling. Sarah took the opportunity to back away toward the elevator. "What?" Arthur's voice changed. It went ice cold. "Are you sure? Send it to me now." He lowered the phone slowly, his eyes glued to the screen of his device. He didn't look at Sarah. He looked at the file that had just been sent to him. Sarah pressed the elevator button. "Come on. Come on." "Sarah," Arthur said. His voice was different now. The warmth was gone. The Ice King was back. She froze. The elevator doors dinged and opened behind her. Arthur turned the phone screen toward her. It wasn't a picture of her. It was a mugshot, an older man with sad eyes and a grey beard. "My head of security just ran a trace on the coding syntax you used," Arthur said, walking slowly toward her. He found a match in the Federal Archives, the Jenkins hash, created by David Jenkins, the cyber-terrorist who stole Navy blueprints 3 years ago. Sarah stopped breathing. "David Jenkins has a daughter," Arthur continued, his eyes hard. "She disappeared the day he was arrested. Her name is Sarah." Sarah backed into the elevator. "Arthur, I didn't—" "Did you plant the bomb?" Arthur asked, his voice shaking with betrayal. "Was this all a setup? You plant the virus, then you swoop in and save me, so you can infiltrate my company? Is that it? Are you finishing your father's work?" "No," Sarah cried, tears finally spilling over. "He's innocent, and so am I. We were framed." "Then why are you running?" Arthur shouted. "Because nobody believes us," Sarah yelled back. "Just like you don't." She slammed her hand on the close door button. "Sarah, wait!" Arthur lunged forward, but the steel doors slid shut just inches from his face. Sarah collapsed against the elevator wall as it plummeted toward the lobby. She had the money. She had saved the company. But now, the most powerful man in New York thought she was a terrorist. And he knew who she was. She had to run. But as she sprinted out of the Sterling Tower lobby and into the morning rush-hour crowd, she realized something terrifying. She had left her phone on the desk in the 40th floor. Up in the tank, Arthur stood alone. He looked at the phone Sarah had left behind. It was a cheap burner, cracked screen. He picked it up. He wasn't going to call the police. Not yet. He swiped the screen. No passcode. He opened her messages. There was only one draft, unsent. "Dear Dad, I found the code. I found the people who framed you. They are at Sterling Dynamics. I'm going to get the proof." Arthur stared at the text. His heart hammered in his chest. She wasn't the saboteur. She was the hunter. And if the person who framed her father was inside Sterling Dynamics, then Arthur was sleeping with the enemy. He looked at the empty elevator. "I have to find her," he whispered, "before they do." Sarah didn't go to the train station. That was where people went when they wanted to be found. Instead, she vanished into the labyrinth of the city, trading her distinct catering uniform for a generic grey hoodie she bought with cash from a street vendor. She found herself in a grungy, 24-hour internet cafe in Chinatown. The air smelled of stale cigarette smoke and instant noodles. It was the perfect place to disappear. She sat in the back corner, her fingers hovering over a greasy keyboard. She logged into a secure, encrypted server she had built years ago. The Ghost Box. It was her digital safe house. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Arthur knew. He knew she was David Jenkins's daughter. By now, he had probably called the FBI. The sirens she heard in the distance sounded like they were coming for her. But she couldn't leave. Not yet. Because when she was in the Sterling system, fixing the logic bomb, she had seen something else. Buried deep in the metadata of the virus was a digital signature. It wasn't just code, it was a receipt. Someone had paid for that virus, and the payment authorization came from a terminal inside the Sterling executive suite. Sarah pulled up a command prompt. She had lied to Arthur about one thing. She said she had closed the back door. She hadn't. She had left a microscopic sliver of access open, a dead man's switch. If she didn't ping the server every 6 hours, it would auto-delete her tracks, but right now, it was her only way back in. Connect. Sterling, mainframe. Port 8080. Status. Active. She was in. She navigated through the file directories, bypassing the security protocols she herself had optimized just hours ago. She hunted for the user log. She needed to know who logged into the master terminal at 4:00 a.m. the previous night to plant the bomb. The cursor blinked. The file opened. User ID, XX02. Sarah frowned. XX01 was Arthur. XX02, that was the vice chairman. Her breath hitched. The vice chairman of Sterling Dynamics was Grant Maxwell, Arthur's godfather, the man who had raised Arthur after his parents died, the man who was supposed to be the moral compass of the company. No way, Sarah whispered. Why would he destroy his own company? She dug deeper. She pulled up the financial records associated with Maxwell, and there it was, a massive, short position on Sterling stock. If the merger failed and the stock crashed, Grant Maxwell wouldn't lose money. He would make billions. And he had used her father's code to do it, framing David Jenkins to cover his tracks 3 years ago, and now using the same code to sink Arthur. Suddenly, a chat window popped up on her screen. Black background, green text. Admin. Hello, Sarah. Sarah froze. She went to yank the power cord, but the text continued. Admin. Don't run. I saw the draft text on your phone. I know you're innocent. It was Arthur. Sarah's hands trembled. She typed back. Ghost. You called the police. Admin. I called no one. I'm looking at the same logs you are. XX02. It's Grant, isn't it? Sarah stared at the screen. He knew. He was smart enough to trace the line, just like she did. Ghost. He framed my father. He stole the prime weave algorithm and sold it to the Russians, then pinned it on Dad. He's doing it again to you. Admin. I know. But I can't prove it. The logs are circumstantial. He'll claim he was hacked. We need the physical hard drive from his private server. It's the only place the original source code would be stored. Ghost. We? There is no we, Arthur. I'm a fugitive. Admin. You're a fugitive because of him. Help me take him down, and I clear your father's name. I have the best lawyers on earth. We can exonerate David Jenkins by morning. It was the offer she had prayed for every night for 3 years. But could she trust a billionaire? Admin. Meet me. 30 minutes. The old shipyard in Brooklyn. Dock 4. Ghost. Why there? Admin. Because it's the only place in the city where cameras don't work. If you don't show, I understand. But Grant knows you fixed the code. He knows you're a threat. If I found you, his hitmen will too. I'm the only safe harbor you have. The chat window closed. Sarah sat in the neon glow of the cafe. She looked at the exit. She could run to Canada. She had the cash, but she would be running forever. She stood up, pulling her hood tight. She was done running. The Brooklyn shipyard was a graveyard of rusted metal and rotting wood. The rain had returned, turning the world into a blur of grey and black. Sarah stood in the shadow of a shipping container, shivering. She clutched the stun gun she carried in her pocket, a pathetic weapon against what she was facing, but it made her feel better. Headlights cut through the rain. The black Maybach rolled slowly onto the dock. It stopped. The engine cut. Arthur Sterling stepped out. He was alone. He held his hands up, showing he was unarmed. "Sarah!" he called out, his voice fighting the wind. She stepped out slowly. "I'm here." Arthur looked at her. He didn't look like a CEO now. He looked tired, his tuxedo shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his hair wet. He looked human. "I checked the syntax," Arthur said, walking closer. "The code that framed your father, it had a signature, a specific error in the floating point decimal, the same error Grant makes when he manually overrides systems. You were right, all of it." "He destroyed my family for money," Sarah said, her voice cracking. "He took my dad away." "And he tried to destroy my legacy," Arthur said grimly. "Grant isn't just a traitor. He's a parasite. But he's powerful, Sarah. He controls the board. He controls the narrative. If we go public without hard proof, he'll crush us both." "So what do we do?" "We break into his office," Arthur said. "Tonight, the Sterling Tower. Are you crazy? The place will be swarming with security." "Exactly. But I'm the CEO. I can get us in the front door. Getting into Grant's private server, that's harder. His office is a fortress. Biometric locks, pressure sensors. I can't hack it. I'm an architect, not a breaker." He looked at her intensely. "But you are." Sarah felt a surge of adrenaline. "You want me to break into the vice chairman's office? I want you to help me steal the evidence." Suddenly, a red laser dot appeared on Arthur's chest. Sarah screamed, "Arthur, down!" She tackled him just as the crack of a sniper rifle echoed off the shipping containers. The bullet slammed into the metal wall where Arthur had been standing a millisecond before. "Go, go!" Arthur yelled, dragging her behind the engine block of the Maybach. Another shot shattered the car's window. "He knows!" Sarah cried, pressing herself against the wet asphalt. "Grant knows we're meeting." "He was tracking my car," Arthur realized, cursing himself. "The onboard GPS, he has access to the fleet data. We're pinned down." Arthur looked at Sarah. His eyes were wild but focused. "Do you trust me? You just almost got me shot. Do you trust me?" he roared. "Yes." "Run for the water," Arthur commanded. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. They sprinted. The sniper fired again, kicking up sparks at their heels. They reached the edge of the dock. Below them, the dark, churning water of the East River waited. "Jump!" Arthur shouted. They leaped into the darkness together. The freezing water of the East River hit Sarah like a sledgehammer. She gasped, swallowing brine, until a strong hand gripped her collar. "Don't surface!" Arthur's voice was a desperate hiss in her ear. They huddled beneath the rotting wooden pylons of the pier, treading water in the pitch blackness. Above them, heavy boots thudded ominously on the wet planks. "Target is gone," a mechanical voice distorted by a radio echoed down. "Current took them. Let's move." Only when the footsteps faded did Arthur drag her toward a rusted service ladder. They emerged in a shadowed alley, blocks away, soaked, shivering, and alive. "We can't go to my apartment," Sarah chattered, her lips blue. "We're going to the safe house," Arthur said, wrapping his wet coat around her. "A place Grant doesn't know exists." The safe house was a dusty, forgotten penthouse in Tribeca, a black asset left to Arthur by his grandfather. Inside, amidst sheets covering antique furniture, the adrenaline crash hit them both. Arthur lit the gas fireplace, while Sarah found an old silk robe in a cedar closet. When she returned to the living room, Arthur was pouring brandy, his hands shaking slightly. Not from cold, but from rage. "I signed the papers," Arthur confessed, staring into the flames. 3 years ago. Grant brought me the investigation against your father. I was so focused on the IPO, I didn't check the math. I let him destroy your family to save my stock price." "You couldn't have known," Sarah whispered, stepping closer. The barrier of class, Waitress and Billionaire, had dissolved in the river. "I should have known." Arthur smashed his glass against the hearth. "I built a machine I couldn't control." He looked at her, his eyes dark with intensity. "I will fix this, Sarah. I will burn Grant to the ground." The air between them crackled. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was gravity. Arthur reached out, his rough fingers brushing the damp hair from her face. When he kissed her, it wasn't tentative. It was a collision of desperation and desire, a promise sealed in the firelight. They broke apart, breathless. "The shareholder meeting," Sarah said, her mind snapping back to the code. "Grant takes full control tomorrow morning. If we can get into his private server—" "We can't hack it remotely," Arthur finished, pulling a laptop from his waterproof bag. "Biometric locks. But—" a dangerous smile touched his lips. "I designed the building. There's a cooling vent that runs from the sub-basement straight to the server room behind his office." "It'll be tight," Sarah said immediately. "But I can fit." "We need a worm to bypass the encryption from the inside," Arthur said, opening a terminal. "We'll call it the Judas Protocol." They worked through the night, fueling themselves on brandy and vengeance. By dawn, the weapon was ready. At 8:00 a.m., a delivery truck idled at the Sterling Tower loading dock. 2 figures in grey janitorial jumpsuits stepped out, carrying toolboxes. Arthur pulled a cap low over his eyes. Sarah gripped the USB drive in her pocket. "Ready to crash the party?" Arthur asked, his voice low. "Let's make him pay," Sarah replied. She pried open the ventilation grate and vanished into the darkness, leaving Arthur to walk straight into the lion's den alone. The ventilation shaft was a claustrophobic nightmare. Metal edges sliced through Sarah's jumpsuit, and dust coated her throat. But the hum of the server room ahead pulled her forward like a magnet. Below her, in the packed auditorium, Grant Maxwell stood in the spotlight, feigning sorrow. "Arthur Sterling is unwell," he lied to the shareholders. "The pressure has caused a psychotic break. He is paranoid, delusional." Backstage, Arthur shoved past a hesitant security guard. "Move, or you'll be guarding a mall in Jersey." He stepped onto the stage, dirty, disheveled, and terrifyingly calm. The crowd gasped. "I don't need help, Grant." Arthur projected his voice without a microphone, commanding the room. "I need the truth." "Security!" Grant hissed, stepping back. "Remove him!" In the sub-zero server room above, Sarah kicked out the grate and dropped to the tiled floor. She sprinted to the executive mirror drive, but a shadow blocked her path. "Don't move!" Marcus Thorne stood in the doorway, his hand hovering over the emergency alarm. "Marcus," Sarah pleaded, holding up the USB drive containing the Judas worm. "He framed my father. He's destroying the company. You care about the code? Then let the code speak." Marcus looked at the alarm, then at Sarah's desperate eyes. He hated her talent, but he hated bad data more. He took a sip of his coffee and turned his back. "I didn't see anyone come in here," he muttered. Sarah jammed the drive in. "Execute." On stage, 4 guards grabbed Arthur. "Now!" Arthur shouted. The massive LED screen behind Grant screeched with static. The pie charts vanished, replaced by grainy footage from 3 years ago. Grant Maxwell sat at his desk, laughing. "Steal the Jenkins algorithm," the digital Grant said clearly. "Plant the evidence on David," I'll make $50 million shorting the stock while the FBI locks him up." The silence in the auditorium was deafening. Grant turned ghost white, clawing at the podium. "It's a deep fake!" he screamed, sweat pouring down his face. "It's AI! It's not real!" "It's the original hard drive," a voice rang out. Sarah emerged from the wings, covered in dust, holding the physical disk high like a weapon. And metadata doesn't lie. Police swarmed the stage. As Grant was handcuffed and dragged away screaming, the chaos seemed to fade for Arthur. He walked straight to Sarah. "You did it," he breathed. "We did it," she corrected. He kissed her right there, in front of the board, the flashing cameras, and the world. It wasn't a CEO kissing a waitress. It was a partnership that had just rebooted the system. 3 months later, the nameplate on the door read, "Sarah Jenkins, CTO." Sarah sat in the glass office, watching the city. Her father, David, was free and sitting on her couch, finally at peace. Arthur walked in with 3 glasses of cheap champagne. "To the code," David smiled. "To the waitress," Arthur whispered, clinking his glass against hers. The glitch that saved the empire. From cleaning tables to running the tech world, Sarah proved that you should never underestimate the person serving your coffee. Grant thought he was untouchable, but he forgot that karma has a way of finding you, even through the air vents. If you enjoyed this story of justice and romance, smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more dramatic stories. Would you have forgiven Marcus? Let me know in the comments.